Hidden deep in the tropical forests of Central America are the remains of one of the most mysterious civilizations in human history, the Maya. This ancient culture left behind majestic pyramids, complex astronomical tables, and orographic writing that has baffled scientists from around the world for decades. But who are these people? How did they achieve such heights in mathematics, astronomy, and architecture, and what led to the mysterious decline of their civilization? Was their disappearance the result of internal conflicts, climate change, or something more mysterious? Although the Mayan civilization cannot be unequivocally called the most magnificent, it can certainly claim the title of the most mysterious ancient culture. These people achieved outstanding success by erecting majestic pyramids rivaling the Egyptians in magnificence and creating exquisite ceramics. Their calendar is still recognized as one of the most accurate calendar systems developed by mankind. The Mayan civilization arose on the foundation of previous cultures such as the Olmecs and Zapotecs on the Pacific coast. Most of the knowledge about the achievements of the Mayans came to us thanks to their development of a writing system with which they left records everywhere from buildings to stones and other objects. Currently, more than 1,000 Mayan city-states have been discovered. Also, numerous small settlements, many have been fully explored, which allows us to constantly discover new facts about this mysterious culture. For example, one of the large Mayan cities, Tikal, with a population of over 100,000 people, was abandoned due to poison water. It turned out that mercury was getting into the reservoir, the source of which was the paint that was applied to the building and other objects. During rains, the pigment got into the reservoirs and the poison accumulated. The territory inhabited by the Maya covered modern-day southeastern Mexico, including the Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, Belize, and the western regions of Honduras and El Salvador. The ancient Mayan civilization was not a monolithic empire under the control of one ruler, but rather consisted of many city-states. Although the tribes were long considered harmless, peaceful farmers, later historians came to the conclusion that this opinion is erroneous. The population constantly was at odds with each other and their neighbors. The historical debate about the origins of the Mayan civilization continues. However, it is known that the Mayan peoples have inhabited the territory of Yucatan for more than 4,000 years. The most ancient archaeological evidence of their culture dates back to the 2nd millennium BC. It is assumed that the Mayan civilization arose between the 7th and 2nd millennia BC, when permanent settlements began to form and the nomadic hunters and gatherers began to develop a new culture. Corn became the impetus for the development of a new culture. The population learned to grow maize and cook it. In addition, they grew zucchini, beans, and other vegetables. Gradually, the tribes began to build cities, improve them, invented water purification systems, developed military art, and not only scientists divide the history of the Maya into 3 main periods: the first or pre-classic period, from the beginning until 317. At this time the Indians began to create city-states, practice slash-and-burn agriculture, and also produce fabrics based on cotton. The Classical or Old Kingdom period from 317 to 990 is the heyday of the Mayan culture, marked by the maximum growth of science and culture, the development of architecture, the creation of an astronomical calendar, and other achievements. It is at this stage that the growth of the largest cities occurs, and at the same time the exodus of the population from them. The post-classic or New Kingdom period from 990 to the 16th century is the gradual extinction of Indian culture. The era of the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors, the outbreak of fratricidal wars, the desolation of cities, the post-classic period was replaced by the colonial period. When the Spaniards begin the conquest of Yucatan, they bring smallpox and other diseases. The Mayan civilization is truly remarkable, with a rich cultural heritage and impressive scientific achievements. Religion formed the spiritual foundation of Mayan culture, as it did in many ancient civilizations. In Mayan belief, the world was a complex entity filled with various sacred powers, so the pantheon of gods was very large. Dozens of gods are known, divided into groups based on their functions: gods of war, fertility, water, hunting, fire, and death stars. The most important were the god of fruitful rain and deadly lightning, with a head like a taper; god of the sun and the night sky; god of corn, patron of life and death. They all had a human appearance, thanks to which they can be easily recognized in hieroglyphic inscriptions. As for architecture, it received the greatest development in the material culture of the Maya. There were two types of architectural structures: residential buildings and monumental ceremonial buildings. Ordinary residential buildings were often erected on platforms, had rectangular outlines, stone walls, pointed, covered with thatched gable roofs. In the center of the house, a hearth was built from stones. The type of ceremonial buildings included pyramids, which served as the foundation of the temple, raising it as high as possible. Higher to the sky, temples were most often located precisely at the tops of the pyramids. They were square, had a cramped interior space, due to the thick walls, decorated with inscriptions and ornaments, and served as a sanctuary. An example of this type of architecture is the Temple of Inscriptions in Palenque. Mayan buildings were built at certain intervals of 5.20 and 50 years. Archaeological data indicate that the Maya refaced their pyramids every 52 years and erected steles and altars every 5 years. The records on the altars reported on any events. Such subordination of artistic culture to the calendar and time did not exist anywhere in the world. 5. Sculpture and painting harmoniously complemented Mayan architecture. Their images represent a panorama of the life of society. The main themes of the images are deities, rulers, and everyday life. Altars and steles were decorated with multi-figure compositions combining various sculptural genres. A mandatory requirement for sculptural figures was a C-shaped turn of the feet, and the head of the figure was depicted in profile. Sculptural monuments were erected in ritual centers, depicting the torso and shoulders from the front, related to the ruler priest whose image was present on the monument, containing a description of some historical event or the genealogy of the person to whom the monument was dedicated. The Indians observed the stars, predicted lunar and solar eclipses, and built a kind of observatory for scientific purposes. The ruins of one of them have been preserved in the city of Chichen Itza. The Mayans determined the length of the year to be 365 days. How this is possible is incomprehensible. Incredible precision. And in mathematics, the tribes used the concept of zero. But in Europe, it began to be used in calculations only after 1228. By the way, the Mayans had a horoscope. They assigned a kin to each day of the year. Depending on its belonging, one can judge a person's character and health. Customs and traditions played a special role in the life of the Mayans, primarily those associated with the birth of a child, reaching puberty, and marriage. The priests gave the baby a child's name and compiled a horoscope for him that predicted which deity would patronize or harm the child throughout his life. One of the main signs of beauty among the Mayans was considered strabismus. For its development, a rubber ball or a small one was attached to the child's hair. A bead hanging between the eyes was tightly bandaged to the front and high social status. In the life of every representative of the Mayan people, the rite of puberty was of great importance. The day for its performance was chosen especially carefully. On the appointed day, all participants in the celebration gathered in the courtyard of the patron's house. The priest performed the ritual of cleansing the home and drove out the evil spirit. The courtyard was swept and mats were spread on the ground. The ritual ended with a feast and general drunkenness. After that, marriage was allowed. Fathers chose future wives for their sons, observing the ban on marriage between persons related by blood. A special activity in Mayan culture was considered a ball game, which had a religious ceremonial nature. Preparation for the game was accompanied by a complex ritual, since it was believed that certain deities enter into a fight during the game. Medicine among the ancient Mayans was also superbly developed. Local people who had undergone certain training were engaged in the treatment of people. Doctors accurately diagnosed many ailments, including asthma, tuberculosis, and ulcers, and treated them through inhalation of potions prepared from natural ingredients. The Mayan Indians had a detailed knowledge of human anatomy, and therefore local doctors were capable of performing complex surgeries. Affected areas of the body or areas where tumors were developing were removed with knives, wounds were stitched with a hair-tipped needle, and narcotic substances were used for anesthesia. Much of the information about this mysterious civilization was obtained thanks to the scientist Yuri Norizov. He alone succeeded in deciphering the ancient Indian writing system. This specialist, however, had never been to America, and he performed all of this titanic work from his office. Mayan writing was hieroglyphic. Norizov discovered that each of the 355 signs was a syllable. He also used pictures to help them understand the meaning of the text in ancient tribes. Thanks to the scientist's contributions, he was able to determine that the Indian writing was verbal and syllabic. Most of the symbols were logograms, which denoted concepts or words, and the rest were phonograms, the sounds of individual syllables. The exact origin of the ancient Indian language is still unknown. It is not similar to any other existing language. According to one legend, the Maya received unique knowledge of the world from a fair-haired god who arrived on a boat. However, these tribes left records everywhere, carved them on stone and wood, drew on ceramics, and wrote on paper. One of the achievements of civilization was the ability to make paper using their texts. The Maya told their descendants about themselves and revealed many secrets of culture. The amazing structures built by these people many centuries ago amazed not only with their scale but also with unique technologies, developed writing, science and medicine, carved from quartz, amethyst, and crystal. One of the artifacts known as the Skull of Fate is kept in a New York museum. The skull has unusual optical properties. By placing any light source under it, you can see how the eye sockets of the skull begin to glow. If, instead of a light source, you place a small object under the skull, then by peering into the eye sockets, you can discern this object inside the skull itself. Scientists cannot yet explain how the Indians carved these with jewelry precision and optical surprises. By the way, the German Nazis believed that whoever collected 13 such skulls would gain power over the world. One of the secrets of May is kept at the bottom of wells. Special depressions in the ground through which underground water flowed were considered sacred by the Indians. Sacrifices and offerings were left there through the wells. The Mayans maintained a connection with the mystical underworld. According to another version, famous astronomy enthusiasts observed the sun at its zenith from these depressions. A column of sunlight plunged vertically into the water. It is noteworthy that tourists can now visit the cenotes. Some of them are open for diving. The Mayans remained in legends as a very bloodthirsty people. It is known that they performed human sacrifices. They tore out the hearts of victims and even allegedly did not disdain cannibalism. This is another Indian secret, since modern scientists suggest that the Mayans were not cruel at all, but released people's blood for sacred purposes, releasing and freeing the soul of the deceased. Another version is sacred. Bloodletting changed the brain's function, causing hallucinations that the Mayans believed visions. We have already spoken about the Mayan Indians' football preferences. However, scientists suspect that it was more than just a sport. According to one version, the Mayans drove a skin-covered human skull around the field, symbolizing the epic struggle of the forces of light with the evil gods. Moreover, the losers of the entire team were sacrificed. This gave rise to a second version, according to which the Mayans had some kind of gladiatorial fights. And at the same time, captive Indians came out onto the field. The losers were tied together and rolled down the numerous steps of the temples. There was little left to reach the bottom of the temple. It was getting to the point it is clear that ancient civilizations are always shrouded in an aura of mystery and secrets, but in the case of the Maya, one of the most intriguing themes remains the reason for the fall of the once great empire. In 1517, Spanish conquistadors set out for Central America, intending to conquer the local Mayan civilization. However, upon reaching the site, the colonizers discovered that a significant part of this work had already been done for them. The question of how the Mayan civilization met its end remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of world history. Let's start with what we already know. In the middle of the 9th century AD, after several centuries of prosperity and dominance, the Maya began to abandon their magnificent cities one after another in less than 200 years. Not a trace remained of the former glory of this civilization. Later, there were isolated bursts of renaissance, but the golden age of the Maya was gone forever. There are many theories explaining the collapse of the Mayan civilization. Among the most common versions are invasion, civil war, and the destruction of trade routes. However, since the first meteorological data from ancient Central America were collected in the early 1990s, the theory has gained particular popularity that the Mayan civilization was doomed to collapse as a result of significant climate change beginning around 820 AD. For 95 years, the areas where the Maya lived were periodically struck by severe drought, sometimes lasting for several decades. Since this prolonged drought became known, scientists have begun to notice a surprisingly clear relationship between the time of its onset and the decline of civilization. Most of the Mayan cities of the classical era were abandoned between 850 and 925 AD, which coincides quite accurately with during the Dry Age. Most archaeological evidence of decline is associated with agriculture. As in all major civilizations, the economic potential of the Maya was highly dependent on the harvest. In addition, the labor force needed food. The simplest explanation for the decline of the Maya is that, under the influence of drought, harvests decreased each year, which may have led to a gradual decline in the political influence of the Maya and to complete social collapse. But even supporters of this hypothesis admit that it was probably not so simple. Conflict between cities is also a good way to destroy a civilization. It is quite possible that the Maya simply killed each other in intercity strife, but in this case, the question of the drought and the coinciding dates still remains open. So, we may be simply dealing with the simultaneous influence of two factors. During the dry decades, food supplies decreased, which likely led to an intensification of the struggle for resources, which ultimately could have reached its climax and entailed an irreversible split in the ancient Mayan civilization. However, there is at least one more explanation that is in no way connected with wars, whatever the cause or causes. We do know something about the fate of the people who survived the collapse of civilization and saw its consequences, starting around 1050 AD. The Maya began to travel, leaving the inland lands where their ancestors had flourished and focusing on the Caribbean coast or other sources of water, such as rare lakes and karst sinkholes glistening in the dense greenery of the former Mayan territory. However, when the Spaniards arrived in Yucatan in 1517, the Maya Indians were already living primarily in agricultural communities. The conquistadors sailed with ill intentions and, in addition, brought to America diseases that were previously unknown to the Maya, for example, smallpox and measles. As a result, by the end of the 17th century, the Maya suffered complete defeat. The last free Mariana city of Taizal fell in 1697. The modern descendants of those same ancient Maya live in Mexico and other territories inhabited by the Indians today. If you just want to subscribe to our channel, like it and turn on notifications so you don't miss new videos. Share your impressions of the video in the comments.